Hey everybody, so we are here in Myerstown, Pennsylvania. We are here at the Union Cemetery, which would be the Reformed and Lutheran Church. I will turn this around. Reformed Church is now the United Church of Christ. That church is now, I think in the last year or two, shut down. They now have an independent church, I believe, that's in that facility. It was the German Reformed Church of Myerstown. Frieden's Lutherans over there. It was originally, we've done a then and now. The original Frieden's Church, Lutheran Church, was over on the corner where Myerstown sort of has a little park. It's where they do the Christmas lighting and New Year's Eve celebration and that type of stuff. But that's where the original church, Lutheran Church, stood. It was actually started by John Andrew Schultz. He was actually, his mother was a Muhlenberg, the daughter of Henry Melchior Muhlenberg, who was the patriarch of that political dynasty. There's also Conrad Weiser within his lineage, so it's quite the lineage. He would wind up going on to become the 6th governor of the state of Pennsylvania from 1823 to 1829. Now that church was torn down, I believe, in the 1960s, 1959, 1960, and the new church is over there. A really pretty church, but we are here for a reason. So for the Isaac Meyer homestead, I wind out doing these historic walks, which this year is sort of difficult because of where the leg is at and that type of stuff. But in July in particular, I do a sort of living history where I dress up as a soldier by the name of Daniel Fisher, Daniel R. Fisher. He's a staff sergeant in the United States Army Air Corps, and there are 4 stones here which I will show you, but I do his story for that, called Myerstown in a Time of War. The reason we do it in July is because July 4th, celebration of independence, and this is part of that story of this family. You have Daniel G. Fisher, which was his grandfather, Anna M. Fisher, who was his grandmother, and then his father, I believe, was John Roy Fisher. Weirdly, I'll tell you the different stories of them and a little bit about them, but I wanted to get these stones cleaned up simply because when this thing comes up in July, if I'm able to do this one again, Myerstown in a Time of War, I would like people to be able to visit and actually read their stones. Josh, my friend Josh and Sharon, Josh had made up a grave marker that looks just like Daniel Fisher's that we could present during that historic dialogue. And when I came out here and finally found the stones, a lot of lichen, the natural growths and that type of stuff, and sort of looking at them, I was like, you can't, it's hard to read them. The grandmother's is decent, but both Daniel, his father, and the grandfather as well are a lot of lichen, and I want to clean those up today, show you a little bit of the process, and go from there, and also tell you their story as much as possible, and we'll go from there. So over there is the newer Frieden's. It's not the original church. But here are the stones. This is Daniel G. Fisher. This is the grandfather. And then the grandmother, Anna M. Fisher. Over here we have John Roy Fisher. He actually served in the U.S. Navy in World War I. Lived 1895 to 1944. He was an electrician. And then the man of the moment, Daniel R. Fisher, 1920 to 1945. He was a staff sergeant in the Army Air Corps, World War II. His grandmother, she was maiden name of Callahan, lived February 3rd, 1874 to April 11th, 1955. And Daniel G. Fisher, April 18th, 1875 to August 9th, 1950. But it's really a tragic story about Daniel Fisher. Survived the war, only to come back and actually make it back to the States and get killed in a car wreck. I'm going to tell you a little bit of their story. The grandparents actually lived here in Myerstown. John would get married, they'd live in Reading. He was an ad executive and for a paper, and did very well for himself. And actually, weirdly, it was hard to find him and his records, because he went by the name, instead of Roy, he actually went by, I believe it was Ray. And it had a bunch of the records with that nickname. So it was sort of hard trying to figure out who was who. And just one of those things that's just very, very interesting. But and Daniel, he would live in Reading with his father and his mother, who passed in 1931. John did get remarried, but was apparently never the same. And Daniel would work, I believe, in a garment factory. And then when it was starting to get understood that war was coming, he decided to join up with the U.S. Army Air Corps and would serve in, I believe it was a B-17 Flying Fortress. And he would be a mid-gunner. Via the rank, you're able to differentiate that that's what he would have served as. So let's get on these stones. We're going to tell a little bit more of the story of these individuals. Got all my equipment and clean these up as good as we can. We did really, really well with my aunt and uncles, and then my grandmother's and great uncles' graves really showed a difference. Those were way better condition than these, certainly. So these are much older as well, 70 years at the best. But a number of these from the 40s. So we're going to do the best we can with these. We're going to spray down. As always, I use water. You can never use enough water. That protects the stone. I use a headstone cleaner. I am eventually going to go over this coming month, since I really do enjoy this. I'm going to get the D2 cleaner, which is what the cemetery associations use. That also works long term. So for like something that's marble, it'll actually clean it over time. You spray it down, you do your thing. You could even just spray it down, and in 3-4 months, maybe go back and spray it again, and then that'll be that white marble again. These are granite. So I don't know how instantaneous, but at least the lichen will be off of there, and you'll be able to actually read these. Being that these men were also veterans, it's all very, very appropriate that we clean their stones so people can recognize them. Because there's one Lady Taffos, I believe it is, she does on Facebook, and I think maybe YouTube, but at least on social media, she makes a statement that these are not just a stone. You have to understand that these stones, this may very well be the last proof, if you will, that somebody existed. It's not just a name on a stone. There's a complete story here to each of these individuals. They lived, they were loved, and it's important that we restore these and really show homage, which is why the series is called A Homage to History. And showing honor to these individuals who came before us. These people were where we're at today. Enjoy the freedoms and the benefits and the joys that we all have is because of the people that have come before us, and they're well worth celebrating. So let's get started. Like I said, you can never use enough water. I'm going to concentrate mainly on the tops, and then this headstone cleaner. I will say this is some potent stuff. It's stinky, but it is an organic cleaner, so it's not damaging the stone or anything like that. It's just, you want to let it sit for a little bit and do its work, and then I'll wind out taking a scraper and getting this stuff off, which I'll show you, the lichen off, and then you wind up taking the different brushes that we have. I dip them in the water in the bucket, and then wind up getting this clean. And over time, this will wind out like D2. It'll wind up cleaning whatever organic matter's left. It's just I'll try to get as much of the lichen off of there as I possibly can, and then spray it down again. But it just takes time, and like I say, you just try to keep it as wet as you possibly can, and protects the stone. With this being granite, it's not like, you know, marble over time can become sort of porous and sort of break down, and you want to protect the stone as much as you possibly can, just because, you know, the idea behind it is to try to clean these, restore them, but also protect the stone as well. And here you can sort of see how easily it comes off. And you start being able to see the stone again, and then when you go over with the brushes, that winds out taking care of a lot of the blacking, which is once again, it's that material, the lichen and those types of things that just are sort of on there. But you can already see how much easier you can see it. And then I just have to get in between. This week I have some pay coming up, so I'm gonna wind out going in here then, and I'm gonna get some new brushes, because you really are supposed to use stuff that's like, you don't use like wire brushes and things like that, because that'll actually do damage to the stone. So you want to wind out ultimately, sorry about my finger there, you want to ultimately go in, have different types of brushes. Horsehair brushes is what's best, so you're not damaging the stone and that type of stuff. But let's pause here for a second. So here we are at Anna M. Fisher, the wife of Daniel G. Fisher, and you're just starting to see how much of a change that actually makes. I did not think it would come out that good. I concentrated less on the sides and more on the tops. So let's get on to Anna M. Fisher. So here's after I scraped off that crap, the lichen, and then I'll show you a little bit more as we do here. One thing that doesn't help right now is I have a nice breeze, and you can see the thing here. I'm actually really tickled with how well that's, I didn't think it was gonna, I think it was gonna still be dark, but sort of cool. I'm gonna do, this is a little bit of a tougher brush. It's basically to get the surface lichen off. I'm not going nuts with this on the sides, just because I need to get better brushes. And the one thing I'm learning as well is the more brushes you have, the better, because quite frankly, that side's like almost dry already. This stuff will wind out killing it, but I can sort of get into all the letters here, and this brush allows you to do it, get them cleaned out, so you have that really nice, where it's very easy to understand what the stone says. I'm going to wind out using my good camera once I get myself a little more acclimated. This stone was a lot cleaner than her husband's, Daniel G. Fisher. My sponge is reaching the end of its life. I forgot to bring some other sponges along, which makes it easier to do this, but I did not plan accordingly. So let that be a lesson, folks. Get the stone cleaned up here. And hopefully this gets as nice as that, which I believe it will, if even not a little nicer. This one was definitely the nicest out of those. You could still read this, whereas like Daniel's was bad. That might have been the worst. I think his grandson Daniel Fisher might be, it's close. Both the son and the father there were probably as bad as Daniel Fisher, but you can now definitely read the stone. So just a bit of history for Daniel G. Fisher and Anna M. Fisher. They were married around 20 years old. They lived in Myerstown, and he actually, by 1930, it sounds like they were already in Reading. But he had worked before as a foreman for garment manufacturing, especially with linens. And he was still doing that by the time came around 1950. He was pretty much done, but was still working that. Anna M. Fisher, of course, once again, they were married around 20 years old. She would live a couple years beyond Daniel, and she was the beloved grandma of Daniel R. Fisher, who we do the series with Myerstown at a Time of War. But were really an integral part of the lives of their child, which at this point I only see John Roy Fisher. Why he had a nickname Ray, I don't know if that's something that they gave to him or what it might have been. But needless to say, I think they moved up probably right around that time when the mother of Daniel R. Fisher and the wife of John Roy Fisher, Marion Fisher, was starting to get sick. Once again, this is John Roy Fisher. And there you can see his mother, Anna M. Fisher, and Daniel G. Fisher, his father. And just look how nice this came out. So, try and find the bucket. You can see how dirty that is. That layer that's over it that makes it impossible to read. And we go into, and actually I'm going to give this a quick spray down again. Like I said, I think one of the keys is you can never use too much water. But he was really a tragic story, because when his wife died, which I have not been able to ascertain what she died of, I talk about in the program that I do. My grandmother, my mom's mom, died of leukemia back when my mom was a senior in high school, and back in that time period, the way doctors, the way society was, is they sort of felt, well, women weren't strong enough to handle bad news like that, so it was better not to tell them because you're protecting them, when in reality that was a really cruel thing to do. I mean, I know they meant well, but so my mom had no idea. Her mom, Helen, probably knew something was bad and it wasn't going to work out. You know, she was going to pass at some point, but my mom had literally no idea, and it sort of haunted her for her whole life, and really was a struggle for her, which is such a shame. You know, to see your mom go through something like that and you're not able to properly, say, be there for them because you don't know what's happening. But anyways, I sort of put in the thing that she died of leukemia. She clearly some kind of disease, you know, because she was still rather young. You know, he was born 1895. I believe she was born in like 1897. And, you know, just horrible thing. And from the sounds of it, from what I've been able to, once again, you ascertain what you can ascertain from the records, this was something that absolutely devastated him. And he just sort of never recovered from the loss of his wife. And just, you know, the grandparents were really, really important because they sort of looked after Daniel, his son, and his daughter. And so they would have spent a lot of time up here in Myerstown with the grandparents, who eventually would wind up moving up over to Reading to be supportive of him, because he would get remarried, but he was just never right after that. And, you know, maybe sort of say in a thing that supposed that he sort of died of a broken heart, and his heart sort of went with her. And not that he didn't love his second wife, he most likely did very much and sounded like he was really a good man, but he just, you know, with great love, when there's loss, it's a devastating thing. And that seems to be certainly the case with this gentleman. But the odd thing is that I think it was Ray that he went by. You would have thought it was like, oh, it was Roy. And maybe it was Roy, that was the nickname, and I'm just not remembering correctly. But I just remember whatever the name, the screwy thing with the name, made it very, very hard to be able to figure out that this is the man that I was looking for. And so it became quite an interesting search. Sort of try to clear the letters out here as best you can, because that's what's really like these two graves is what's going to make them decipherable and truly be able to come by here and say, okay, cool. John Roy Fisher, he actually went by the name Ray. In a lot of census records, it's Ray J. Fisher, John Fisher, which makes it somewhat confusing when looking for records. He did serve in World War I as an electrician for the U.S. Navy. He would wind up marrying the love of his life, Marion Fisher, at 17 years old. She would have been, I think, about 16. So they married very, very early. And she would wind up passing away in 1931. Not really sure what it was. He was, he worked started out working in Reading in garment manufacturing as an employee, ultimately wound up becoming an ad executive for local papers.
and was quite successful, but never really recovered from his wife, Marion, passing away at 1931. They had 2 children, Daniel R. Fisher, and it's actually Daniel Ray after, I guess, his nickname, and June Fisher. And in 1944, he passed away and never got to see his son again when he came back from the war.
It's so important to remember our history and these people and do these types of things. I really have to say, I said this a number of times, I am really tickled with how these have come out. I was not expecting that. I was thinking this is going to wind out really, I got liching on these things yet, but I'll spray them down with D2 and that'll kill, because I just don't have the brushes to be able to get the rock that's sort of more raggedy around the edges. I found that out in my little bit of experience. And we will go to the last grave that we have. This is the grave of Daniel R. Fisher. He served as a staff sergeant in the Army Air Corps. He was on a B-17. He was been a med gunner, because the way they work out is did not think this through here, how I was going to do this, but you had 10 positions, I believe, in the B-17. There were 4 lieutenants, which were the pilots. At the very least, they were lieutenants. You could have them as high as colonels or even higher. Once again, I do apologize for my videoing. I'm not an octopi, so I only have so many arms, and once I get the camera going for this project, it'll be a lot better. Just right now, we're sort of doing what we're doing, and it's working. It just isn't necessarily the prettiest for filming, so I do apologize, but the main thing is getting this process down. And
so to continue that conversation, I sort of got lost, and the phone wound up shutting off because it was a little warm. The 4 positions that they had that were lieutenants were the 2 pilots, lieutenants or higher, and then you would have, I think, the bombardier and a navigator. They might be the same person, but and one of them operated sort of as the front gunner as well. But those positions, those would wind up being lieutenants. They were the highest for what they were commanding. Then you would have 2 technical sergeants. One was the radio man, and I can't think of what the other one was, but 2 individuals that would handle those responsibilities. And the last 4 positions would have been staff sergeants, and these were the gunners. You had 2 mid gunners, you had a bubble gunner, and you would have the rear gunner. The 2 mid gunners, this guy, Daniel Fisher, was about 5'8", 150 pounds. The bubble gunner usually was a really small guy, because you had to sort of get squished into that bubble gun underneath, and they were usually 5'2" to 5'4". I think it's Memphis Belle, Sean Astin, who played Rudy, plays the bubble gunner, and then the rear gunner was a little bit bigger. There's a slight chance Daniel could have been the rear gunner, but probably not. He was probably a mid gunner.
Not quite sure what I all lost there, but I'll give you as much of the story as possible and repeat, I think, because I'm not sure what is left of it, because it gets warm out here and the phone starts getting a little weirdy about being warm, and then it stops filming. But because of his rank, his size, weight, what made the most sense was him being one of those mid gunners, which was an incredibly difficult job. The worst job probably in all of it you know, obviously the pilots, that stank. There's nothing remotely like, hey, I'm so glad I get to pilot one of these things through 4th of July sort of fireworks. You know, it's great from a distance, but not great up close. Anyways, these mid-gunners, you know, that's the main area of the plane that a lot of that shrapnel and stuff will come through. So a lot of those guys got killed. I forget what the death rate was, but it was one of the worst death rates, if not the worst death rate in the war. It was not a position that a lot of guys made it through, and he was fortunate enough to actually make it through the entire war, and ultimately, unfortunately, was killed in a car wreck. And after he got back to the States in California, and the only thing that makes sense is they didn't have enough missions to warrant being sent home, so they had to go to the Pacific to then continue their service. And unfortunately, you know, they had to continue. Now, on their way over, the A-bombs would have been dropped, and that would have been it. And so that's why they would have wound out in California then. I would say this was probably the worst one. It had a little bit deeper in lichen, a little more of the grass on it and all that. So, but needless to say, it looks pretty darn good.
Here we have the grave of Daniel Ray Fisher. He was named Ray after his father's, I assume, nickname. Born in 1920, lived in 1945. He was a staff sergeant in the Army Air Corps. I believe served on a B-17 Flying Fortress as a mid-gunner in World War II. He would work in garment manufacturing in Reading, but then as the war grew nearer and near, he decided to enlist before, I think, January of 1941, so even before Pearl Harbor. He saw the war coming and decided that he wanted to join the Army Air Corps and serve throughout. Never got to the full missions that you needed to go home. So after the war in Europe was over, he and his crew would have been sent over to the Pacific with the understanding that they would wind up being in the bombing runs on the invasion of Japan. Before they got out into the Pacific or over to Japan, the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they continued on to, I believe, probably most likely San Diego. And ultimately, he went for a drive to experience California, and on that drive, even though he made it back to the United States, he wound up being killed in a terrible car accident and never fully made it home. His mother, Marion Fisher, had died in 1931, not really sure of what, and his father died in 1944 before he ever got back. So, you know, beloved grandparents, Daniel G. Fisher and Anna M. Fisher, who never got to see their grandson again and didn't get to see his sister June either. It's just a really sad story, but a man that honorably served his country, and unfortunately this was the price of freedom, never fully got back home.
So with that, I want to say thanks for coming along on another Homage to History. I'm going to show you the after here. These stones really turned out well. I'm very, very happy with the end result here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and see you all about town. So here are the afters, and like I said, these turned out so much better than I thought they were going to. Once again, Daniel G. Fisher, this is the grandfather. Grandmother Anna M. Fisher. You have John Roy Fisher, the father, and last of all, Daniel R. Fisher. We just got finished doing this one. So I am gonna take my stuff back over the van and then come back here and take afters. Today we're looking at the graves of Daniel G. Fisher, Anna M. Fisher, John Roy Fisher, and Daniel R. Fisher. This family is buried over in the Union Cemetery in Myerstown, Pennsylvania. And these are the before and afters. History is out there, my friends.